I honestly don't understand why anyone hired you. If you can't even make a decent cup of coffee, what exactly are you good for here?" Vanessa Carter said it coldly, right in the middle of the office in front of dozens of co-workers. She lifted the cup, took one sip, then slammed it down and mocked Lucas Bennett out loud, the new intern who happened to be a single father. She even declared she would have leadership fire him immediately. Laughter rippled through the room. Lucas simply wiped the spill and returned to his desk. No one knew that the very intern she humiliated would soon control the entire corporation. So who was he really? The Ashford Global Tower stood 40 stories above the financial district, its glass face catching the gray morning light like a blade held flat. Inside on the 22nd floor, the marketing and operations department ran on the quiet hum of ambition, where every desk was a small kingdom and every promotion a war fought in whispers. Lucas Bennett walked through those glass doors on his first Monday, carrying nothing but a plain leather bag and the kind of calm that made people underestimate him. He was 35, unremarkable in a charcoal sweater, the sort of man who could stand in an elevator for 6 floors and leave without anyone remembering his face. What none of them knew was that his last name matched the one etched into the lobby's founding plaque. Lucas was the only son of Richard Bennett, the chairman who had built the company from a single leased office into a corporation spanning 3 continents. He was on paper the heir to all of it. But paper was not what his father wanted him to inherit. Richard had told him plainly over dinner 2 weeks earlier that a man who inherits a throne without ever kneeling on the floor will never understand the people who hold it up. So the arrangement had been made in silence. No announcement, no special treatment, no name recognition. Lucas would enter Ashford Global at the very bottom as an ordinary intern in an ordinary department, and he would stay there for a stretch of weeks long enough to see how the company truly ran when the powerful believed no one important was watching. Human Resources had been given a false background file. His badge listed him simply as Lucas B. Temporary Intern Department of Operations. He wanted it that way. He wanted to earn whatever came next, and more than that, he wanted to see the truth. There was another reason he took the assignment seriously, one he kept folded quietly inside himself. Lucas was a single father, and he had learned in the hardest years of his life that patience was not weakness, and that dignity did not require an audience. He had spent a long time rebuilding a life after loss, learning to stand steady when the ground moved. That steadiness was the thing people mistook for softness. It was, in fact, the strongest thing about him, though it would take the 22nd floor a while to understand that. His first hours set the tone. No one showed him the work. No one explained the systems, the reporting lines, the projects that mattered. Instead, the senior staff sized him up the way established animals size up a newcomer at the edge of the territory, deciding quickly that he was harmless and therefore useful. Within an hour, he had been handed a stack of documents to photocopy, a printer to unjam, and a supply closet to reorganize. He did all of it without complaint, and his silence was read wrongly as the silence of a man with nowhere better to be. The person who read him most wrongly and most loudly was Vanessa Carter. She had been at Ashford Global for 9 years and wore that tenure like a title of nobility. Somewhere along the way, she had decided that seniority was the same thing as authority, and that the newest and lowest person in the room existed primarily to make her own day run smoother. She did not manage the department, but she behaved as though the department managed itself only with her permission. When she saw Lucas, she saw a blank space she was entitled to fill with errands. By the end of the first day, she had already learned his usefulness and claimed it. By the end of the first week, she treated it as her right, and the weeks that followed only deepened the habit. Lucas fetched lunch orders that were never quite correct enough. He carried packages up from the loading dock. He wiped down the glass conference table before her client calls and stayed late to break down the chairs after. And every single morning, without fail, he brought her coffee, prepared exactly to the specifications she recited, as though they were commandments carved in stone. He watched more than he was watched. That was the part no one accounted for. While he moved through their small cruelties, he was reading the department like a ledger. He saw which employees did the real work, and which ones performed the appearance of it. He saw who took credit in meetings, and who stayed silent while their ideas were repeated back to them by louder voices. He noticed the two decent people who treated him like a colleague rather than a servant, and he saw how the culture punished their decency by loading them with the tasks the others avoided. He said nothing. He simply remembered. Vanessa, for her part, seemed almost to need an audience for her power. Correcting Lucas privately would have given her nothing. Correcting him in front of the floor gave her everything, the small theater of dominance that reassured her she still mattered. She would call out his mistakes across the open plan loud enough to turn heads, and the turned heads were the point. A few coworkers laughed each time, not because it was funny, but because laughter is the cheapest form of safety in a room where cruelty has become the weather. The pattern held across those weeks, tightening rather than easing. Lucas absorbed it the way a wall absorbs a thrown stone. He did not argue, did not explain, did not once let slip that the name on the plaque downstairs belonged to his father. Part of that was strategy, because the moment he revealed himself, the experiment his father wanted would collapse into performance. But part of it was simpler and older than any plan. He wanted to know how far this culture would go when it believed it faced someone with no power at all. The answer came on a Thursday morning near the end of his time on the floor. He had brought her coffee as he did every day, prepared exactly as instructed, and set it down at the corner of her desk without a word. Vanessa was mid-conversation with two coworkers, gesturing about a weekend she felt she deserved and had been denied. She lifted the cup absently, took a sip, and her face changed before the sip was even finished. She set it down slowly, and the entire performance that followed was built on that small, deliberate silence. "What is this?" she said, not as a question. She turned in her chair so that the floor could see her turn. "I don't even know how a person messes this up. It's coffee. It is the single easiest thing anyone has ever asked you to do." Lucas stood where he was. "I made it the way you asked," he said evenly. "If it's wrong, I'll make another." That answer, calm and unbothered, seemed to offend her more than any excuse could have. She rose from her chair, and now she was performing to the whole 20-second floor, her voice pitched to carry over the low hum of keyboards and phones. "I honestly don't understand why anyone hired you," she said. "If you can't even make a decent cup of coffee, what exactly are you good for here? You come in every morning, you shuffle around, you take up space, and you can't manage the one thing an intern is supposed to manage." The room had gone quiet in the way rooms do when they sense blood. A few faces turned down toward their screens, ashamed to watch, and unwilling to intervene. Others watched openly. Vanessa fed on the attention. "You know what?" she went on. "I'm going to talk to leadership. I'm going to recommend they let you go today because, frankly, I don't have time to babysit someone this useless. People like you don't belong in a company like this. You're a waste of a desk." Somewhere near the printers, someone laughed. It was a small sound, but it gave permission, and two others joined it low and mean. No one stood. No one said her name in warning. No one told her she had crossed a line, because on the 22nd floor, the line had been erased so long ago that most of them had forgotten it ever existed. That silence, Lucas would later reflect, was louder and more damning than anything Vanessa said. Cruelty needs no defenders when it has enough bystanders. He looked at her for a long moment, and there was nothing in his expression that she could use no anger to feed on, no fear to enjoy. He picked up the rejected cup from the corner of her desk. "I'll make another one," he said, and his voice did not shake. Then he turned and walked back toward his desk.